I'm very pleased to have here also some Italian interpreters. So for the first time, we are also with Italian. We have Danila and Giacomo in the Italian booth. And then we have Adele and Adele in the French one. So I would like to remind to all that as we have the interpreters, when you will do the question, try to go as slowly as possible so they will be able to translate. The first part, the presentation, will be directly in English, but then if we will have the dialogue part, they will need to switch buttons, so don't make mess, we go slowly and we will do everything. So regarding this, we will put in the chat how to go in the interpretation booth. So on the bar down, you have the word, the icon that is a word, and you can click and you can decide in which booth go. And of course, the main hall is in English. And yeah, today there is also Giuseppe De Santis from Rete Semirurali, who's helping me. So if you have any questions regarding technical issues or the number of telephone to get in, things like this, I mean, he will help me in doing this kind of things. And yeah, for the rest, we will also put the link to all the documents that we are going to speak about. So you are able, most of them probably already saw, but if you never had it, so you are able to saw those. And as well to the newsletter. So you are able also to follow the entire process. So today we have Fulia that will do the general presentation. She's a lawyer based in Brussels, for those who don't know her, and she's writing the Sprouts from Brussels newsletter, and she will do a general overview, and afterwards we will go more into the EU seed study. And then we have Magdalena, who will bring a part of the process that Arkenoa done. So most of you already know this, but today we also have some people who don't know this this path. So sorry for those who will listen things twice. Okay, so that's it, Fulia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. May I ask everyone to turn off their cameras, because otherwise you'll actually be on YouTube if you don't turn off your cameras. If you're willing to do so, that's obviously up to you, but I'm not sure you can. Okay, so our menu of the day has only 3 parts. So I'm just going to focus on the adoption of the Delegated Act on organic heterogeneous material, the EU Commission study on what they call new genomic techniques, and then the main plat du jour, which is the EU Commission study on seeds marketing reform. Okay, so for those who don't know, the Sprouts from Brussels arrive in your mailbox once a month, but they're also put on the Let's Liberate Diversity website, and as a result can be translated in Spanish and French, because the entire website is now translatable. So if you would like to have access to the information in your native language, you can do so by going to the Let's Liberate Diversity website. So the first point that I would like to talk about, it's the end of a long saga to which some of you who are here participated actively, and are also the main reasons why we actually have this delegated act, very positive delegated act, that allows that will allow on the 1st of January 2022 to put on the market organic heterogeneous material following a notification process. So no need to register a variety, and also no need to conform to the uniformity requirements of the general seeds marketing legislation, but rather be able to actually use heterogeneity in organic farming after notification of this so-called organic heterogeneous material, you're going to be able to sell the seeds of that material. So this is all linked to the organic regulation, which was adopted in 2018, but will enter into force only in 2022. And the delegated act has been basically worked on ever since then. It was a long process, but it was adopted by the European Commission on the 7th of May. So a few weeks ago. And if you go, there's a link in the Sprouts. If you go on that link, you will be able to access the delegated act itself in the 23 official European languages. So again, you can access all of this information in your native language if legal English is a bit different for you, difficult for you. Then now basically the European Parliament and the European Council have 2 months to object to the text, and it will be adopted for entry into force in 2022 officially. So what is the content of the delegated act? Briefly, basically, it provides, in my opinion, a very flexible crop diversity enabling framework. First, one of the things that have been added in the past months of the negotiation is that there's no need to notify organic heterogeneous material before exchanging seeds for research or breeding. This is officially written down in the delegated act. So you don't need to go through the entire procedure, which is already much more flexible than the strict requirements we have in the seeds marketing directive. But you don't even need to do that if you're actually using this material for research or breeding. And then the procedure itself is, it's not a registration process, it's a notification process, which, you know, you see the difference of philosophy behind already. The idea is that you notify still the seed authorities, but you notify it with a dossier where you need to describe your organic heterogeneous material that you would like them to list on a list, not on the formal catalog. And you need to basically characterize both the heterogeneity and the common characteristics of your material. You need to describe the type of technique you used, and that technique can be either population breeding, where you end up with a cross-composite population, but it can also be on-farm selection and management of diversity, or also any other type of technique. So it's pretty open-ended, and it's not limited to so-called cross-composite populations, which you might have heard of before. Okay, so in the notification dossier, you also have to tell which parental material you used. But the idea of parental material, even though it's linked to conventional traditional breeding in your sense, the way it's written in the act, it's much more wide. So it can actually be a farmer selection or a traditional variety that you used before. So you don't need to go to the entire process that you would have to in a normal plant breeding process, if you wish. And then you need to also notify the country of production or breeding of the material. Once you have the dossier, this is in the basic act, the authorities have 2 months, I think, to respond to you. And then the material is listed, even if they don't come back to you, it happens automatically. So it's a much more flexible and streamlined process. Then once the material is notified, you can market the seeds of that notified material, and also anyone else can actually market those seeds. It's the same principle that you have in the catalog. And to market those seeds, you need to make sure that the identity of those seeds belong to the organic heterogeneous material that has been notified. You need to comply with certain quality requirements, which are linked to sanitary requirements that come from the plant health regulation. So which means that if you are dealing with species where regulated non-quarantine pest has been listed, then you would need to give a plant passport, except in the exceptions that are in the regulation. But so these are the rules you need to follow. And then the delegated act also refers to all the requirements that are in the general seed marketing directives, mostly on germination rate, so purity levels, but it's very much quality, so it's like humidity and things like this. So it's the general quality requirements of the seed directives, but never uniformity, etc. Then another point, which is very positive, I think, about this entire regime is the packaging and labeling. It's a very, very flexible system. There's no official seal, no official label, and quite a large derogation for small packages. So you don't need to do all the infrastructure investment that are required usually by the formal seed marketing directives. For also the controls that are done have to be post-marketing, so there's no pre-marketing control except the notification. And when you have post-marketing controls, they have to be risk-based. This is also a big change, I think, from the directives that we're under today. And the maintenance is not mandatory. It is only to be done if it is possible. So these are very different mindsets, you know, with organic heterogeneous material. So the second thing that happened the past months, we already talked about this in the last ECLLD dialogue, but we had the dialogue just on the day that the Commission published its study. So it was a bit of rush. And so we didn't have time to really actually go into the details of the study. So today I have a few slides that will hopefully allow you to understand what's happening in the realm of new genomic techniques in Brussels here. And basically the EU Commission was asked in November 2019, at the same time they were asked to act on seeds marketing, they were asked to do a study on new genomic techniques, and by the European Council, so by member states. And that study was published on the 29th of April. And it's quite a lengthy document. It's, I think, 120 pages long. It lists the scientific and market state of the art of these techniques, so what they are, what products are in the pipeline right now, the legal status of the techniques, the implementation of the current legislation, safety and risk assessment considerations, and stakeholder views on risk and benefits. That's the study. It looks okay, but then its conclusions are quite worrying, to say the least, because the Commission basically says that the new genomic technique products have the potential to contribute to sustainable food systems with plants more resistant to diseases, environmental conditions, and climate change effects. And that is why they believe, the Commission believes, that they need to take action to contribute to the objectives of the Green Deal and the farm to fork strategy, to ensure a more competitive economy. Okay, when they talk about the potential of these techniques, you should also know, as we pointed out at the last dialogue, that the first ever request, so for authorization in the EU, concerns, again, a herbicide tolerant crop. Okay, so great potential. Then in the study, at the conclusion of it, basically the Commission says that they will initiate targeted policy action on plants that are derived from certain new genomic techniques. So these two techniques, targeted mutagenesis and cisgenesis, they basically see that there are less risks entailed with those techniques, and that there are close to they develop products that are close enough to products developed by conventional breeding, that they actually require a different set of rules than the GMO framework that we have today. And then they say basically that for the other new genomic techniques, they need to wait up a bit and build up the required scientific knowledge and see if they want to act further afterwards. But right now, for that, nothing is changing, but definitely we're coming up. So they're going to come up with a legislative procedure for targeted mutagenesis and cisgenesis. the reactions to the study, they've fused, like you've had so much more of it than for instance on the seeds marketing, which also, you know, it comes with the territory. But obviously big actors welcomed the study and its outcomes. So Euroseeds, this is the industry association, the seed industry association, seed and biotech, and they basically welcome the differentiated and practical approach, and they ask for no undue lengthy legislative process, or whatever that means. Then EuropaBio, so they are the ones that they're again a lobby organization that encompasses all the biotech industry, pharmaceutical and agricultural. They basically welcome the fact that they can finally deliver innovation. Copa Cogeca, which is the industrial farmers and cooperative organization, they basically welcome it by saying it's a game changer for farmers. They didn't have a press release, but this comes from an interview they made with Euractiv, which is part of the Brussels press. And EPSO, which is the European Plant Science Organization, which regroups scientists, but I mean, honestly, it's mostly molecular biologists who've been working on GMOs most of their time, and the working group on agricultural technologies has various levels and very surprising levels of conflicts of interest. But they welcome the study because the Commission is finally not preventing scientific and societal progress. On the other side of the equation, you have obviously different types of movements and organizations that criticize and express their concerns over the study. So when you look at the organic movement, iFarm Organics Europe slashed the assumed benefits of these techniques, while the Demeter Federation said the Commission was willing to take over our freedom of choice. Peasant organizations, so like the European the European Coordination via Campesino, said that the Commission wanted to change the legislation without implementing it first. And from civil society, Friends of the Earth Europe decried the fact that the European Commission wanted to remove the safety checks. Another lobby letter, so an advocacy letter that was done, is a common call from mostly German organizations, Test Biotech, ABL, so which is the German peasant organizations, IG Saatgut, which is a breeding association, association from breeders and seed savers, and then Save Our Seeds, who also mostly work on gene drives. They basically asked the Commission to keep gene scissors under control. So it's going to happen next. Right now, the European Commission is in consultation with the member states, so the European Council, but also the stakeholders. So yesterday, there was a big meeting. We're going to talk about more the seeds marketing side, but there was a big meeting also on this new Genomic Techniques study. And it was, I think, quite the fight, to say the least. But what we know, we don't have a timeline because the Commission has not provided a timeline, but there will be an impact assessment for a new policy framework for products that have been developed with targeted mutagenesis and cisgenesis. And the idea of the Commission is to have proportionate regulatory oversight. So they don't rule out risk assessment and authorization procedures or labeling or traceability, but they need to be proportionate to the risks, as the Commission says. So it can't be within the current GMO directive, which is deemed by the European Commission to be unproportionate for these two techniques, at least. Then on the same day, so this is the major topic of this meeting today, the European Commission also published its study on the reform of seeds marketing legislation. So the process was the same. It was also commissioned by the study, so by the European Commission in November 2019. And as most of you will know there was a consultancy, a big consultancy, so ICF. They don't just do agriculture and food, but a big consultancy has done a fact-finding study for, I think, 8 months. So it started in July last year, and they ended it in February of this year. And in that study, which you can access now on the internet, only in English though, they cite problems with the legislation currently on seeds marketing, as the lack of coherence with plant health requirements, because so you have some pests that are listed in the plant health regulation, which are not the same as those that are listed in the seeds marketing directives. And because of the way the directives are structured, you cannot change the list of those pests without amending the directives. They also talk about insufficient enforcement. So this is a criticism of not also being inside the official controls regime. They mention burdensome registration and seed certification. So it's slow, it costs a lot of money, etc., and it doesn't work. They also cite administrative differences between member states and variable costs. And so you see the word forum shopping a lot in the fact-finding study. Okay, so they basically say so because some administrations are more efficient and less expensive than breeders and other industry players basically choose certain countries more than others. Another problem that has been identified, which is quite closer to the ECLLD membership, is that the system has been considered unfit for non-conventional varieties. And so they point out that the historical focus on productivity has led to the seed marketing directives not catering to the needs of diversity farmers, which is something that is written down in the text. I find quite interesting. And also the problem of the lack of flexibility that the member states have, that they could basically use perhaps to accommodate these non-conventional varieties. Well, they can't do it because everything needs to come from Europe. So from the EU, and the member states can't do it. So this is one of the arguments that has been put forward, which I don't completely agree, but yeah. This is what's written in the study. And then they also point out to the lack of clarity of the terms that are used. So what is commercial use? What is the region of origin? Which is true, it's interpreted very differently in different member states. So that's a big problem as well. That's been identified by ISF. In the study, there's also an entire section on amateur gardeners. So they've done different surveys with the gardeners themselves, with maintainers of varieties. And the preferences of gardeners have been identified as mostly actually for gardening for enjoyment, for aesthetic reasons. And they ask, so there's a desire to have more traditional and local or organic seeds, very little quality problems, only in 2 countries, namely Slovenia or Slovakia and Greece. And otherwise, gardeners are quite okay with the seeds they receive, obviously. And the main conclusion of the consultancy is, okay, which trade-off could you have in the legislation between diversity and quality, which is a very different conclusion, so that I don't follow completely their syllogism, to be honest. Then there's an entire section also on technological developments, where they talk about biomolecular markers, new genetic engineering techniques, ensuring traceability through blockchain, to digital unique identifiers, which, it comes a bit out of nowhere, but I think they've been asked to do so. And something that really also has been picked up by the European Commission afterwards is this idea of biomolecular markers. Then the study, so this was the consultancy study and its findings. So now what is the European Commission take on it? And they interpret the study in a certain way. So they don't copy paste the problems that have been identified by the consultancy. So the problems that the commission identifies are a bit more overarching. So they're larger scoped, if you wish. And they don't talk about the fact that the legislation is unfit for non-conventional varieties. They rather say that the legal framework is complex, is incoherent and fragmented. And they write black on white, which is quite shocking to me, at least, without any nuance, that farmer seed exchanges are considered as marketing of seeds. They don't even mention the different definitions of seed marketing that exist in different member states. This is not done in the ICS study either. Huh? This is, I think, something we can really point out, so that the scope of the legislation is very different from member state to member state, and this is not really flagged either by the ICF consultancy study or by the European Commission. The European Commission, nonetheless, points out at the complexity, the rigidity of procedures. So they want to be able to act more with delegated acts on technical issues. They also point out to the lack of harmonized rules on official controls. So the system is too heavy, it costs too much money. It also creates internal market problems and a non-level playing field, so between different industry players, and it creates obstacle to innovation. So this is a conclusion from the Commission that I do not find the reason of in the fact-finding study, to be honest. And then what does the Commission staff working document say? So they basically list out options for reform. So the conclusion is definitely that you need legislative change, just as much as it's the same with the new GMO situation. So in that file, the Commission said you need legislative change for targeted mutagenesis and cisgenesis. Here the EU Commission says you need to change all of it, right? But there's still an option saying do nothing. And if we do nothing, we can't align the legislation to the European Green Deal. So this is a fact, it's stated. Okay, so they say we can fix certain things, but we won't be able to align the legislation with the greater goals that we have in the farm to fork strategy or the biodiversity strategy. Option one is we do a little bit of improvement and coherence, work on coherence. So coherence is here with plant health and official controls, and add in some sustainability measures here and there so that we get closer to the European Green Deal, but we're not there yet. Okay. And option two is we're going full for it. Okay, so we're going for full flexibility to adapt and improve access to genetic resources. And we make sure that the legislation right now is not only driven for productivity, but it is also about sustainability and achieving the European Green Deal goals. Okay, so I have to say, I mean, the way it's written down, they're really trying to market this option two, right? And then in option two, you have two pathways, which are in full contradiction with one another, which I think is also shows in a way the discussions that are happening here in Brussels about how to deliver this European Green Deal and how to deliver the targets we have on the farm to fork. You have one side which basically says you need technology and technological fixes, and we're going to get there. We're going to reduce pesticide use, etc. And another group which basically says this is a complex problem. You can't fix it with simple technology. You need to change the system because it's also a systemic issue. And option A is this systemic approach, I think, a bit more, where you balance flexibility and harmonization while still having guarantees for users. This is the option where the sale of seeds to amateur gardeners will be outside the scope of the legislation. You would have an ad hoc framework, they call it, for farmer seed exchange. We don't know what it is, but at least there's something. inside of it. And it goes to show that it won't be the same system as what exists for industrial farming and industrial agriculture, and also the facilitation of the registration for conservation or amateur varieties. So this would be much more, I think, biodiversity and social justice friendly option. And then option 2B, it's full flexibility with high guarantees for users. So nothing changes. Actually, it gets even stricter than it is today. So all the derogations that we use as crop biodiversity actors will be interpreted restrictively, and everything will be in line with the official controls and plant health regulation, which is very strict, and which are also built around this obligation to register as a professional operator. The reactions to the study, you have a bit less of them. So Euroseeds welcomed the uniform application and the integration of new technologies and managerial possibilities. Here you need to read the possibility to do testing on their own with only official supervision. So they don't want to send their seeds to test by public authorities because it takes too long, it's too expensive. They rather do them themselves. So they're very happy that the European Commission and the member states want them to do this. But, and a big but, it's a big caveat. They say that there's enough flexibility for niche markets, and the Commission options are completely against the objectives of market-driven innovation through improved varieties for sustainable food security and serving the needs of seed users, while the Commission clearly states that the objectives of the legislation need to change, right? And they can't be just about those two things. Then iFarm Organics Europe welcome the recognition that the current rules do not provide a good basis to introduce adapted testing requirements for the development of organic varieties suitable to organic production. I think they're going to come up, I don't know if Martin's here, but they're going to come up with a longer press release and analysis, but this was just the first reaction. And then we're going to hear about the Arkanoa position from Magdalena, but just in one line. The press release of Arkanoa, so Austrian Seed Savers, welcomed the alignment of the legislation with the European Green Deal, but flagged concerns that the exchange of seeds was equated to commercialization by the European Commission, and which contradicts currently applicable Austrian law and also international law with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and people living in rural areas. So what's next? Right now, so by the 10th of June, is that it? We're going to have an inception impact assessment, so which is a 5 to 6 pager where the Commission develops a bit more the options I presented to you, and they make like they insert some text about the little impacts that each option would have. And then you have 4 weeks to respond to this impact assessment, inception impact assessment. And by June, July, they will go for the full impact assessment, which is a longer document and requires more quantitative analysis. And that will go to an external consultancy. So the last reform, it was done by the Commission services and it was criticized by the European Parliament. So this time, they're taking it slow and they're going to an external consultancy that they can blame if some things, don't go well. Then you will have, so it will take them a year. So the consultancy will have a year to do this impact assessment all throughout the year. So from the 2021 to the beginning of 2022, you will have an open public consultation. So basically, this is the way the Commission says, I'm going to listen to you all for the entire year. And end of next year, 2022, a legislative proposal should be adopted by the Commission, not by the European Parliament and Council. So the proposal will be sent to the European Parliament and the Council, but in the letter that was sent by the Commission, so on the 29th of April, they basically already show a bit their hand, and they say they want to put into effect amendments for the legislation to be in line with the European Green Deal and the farm to fork biodiversity and climate adaptation strategies to ensure that the legislation is applied uniformly, effectively, efficiently, and more open for future developments, high level of protection of the environment, sustainable, supportive of biodiversity, climate proof. So very, very ambitious goals. And this is all from me. I think I've already talked a bit too much. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. Maybe it's after Magdalena that I'll hand that for you.
Thank you, Fulia. Thank you for your
Sorry.
long presentation. But no, was I mean, making easy so such complexity and difficult topics is really also the wording. I mean, there are many different things that are interacting. So thank you very much for the clear explanation. I don't know how you would like to act, because probably at this point it's better if also Magdalena do the presentation, and then we start with the Q&A session, so people can also open the video and ask directly questions. I think because otherwise we start now in starting some questioning and then we lost completely. So as the topic is, okay, perfect. So Magdalena, the floor is yours if you share the screen, and then, of course, if you would like to make a question, there is also the Q&A part. Otherwise, I'm seeing also Blanche comments, but probably also after we can do directly on video, it's easier. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. I'm Magdalena, and I'm with the team of Agenoa, an Austrian seed-saving organization. And
Magdalena, if you can put the presentation mode. Yeah.
Do you see it
yes.
correctly
now?
Thank you. Thanks, Matthias. So, and I was asked to talk to you today a bit because from Agenoa, we had a workshop on the study on the options for seed marketing reform on the 10th of May as part of the Agenoa project. Gemeinsam Vielfalt befreien, Liberating Diversity Together, which is supported by the Software AG Stiftung, and in which we try to bring together different seed-saving organizations and different organizations active in the field for this reform. And so at the 10th of May, we had this workshop. Many of you who are here today were also there. And Fulia presented for us the ICF study and the study of the Commission in more detail. And we also gave our perspective on it, and then had a part on where we exchanged and also looked on the way forward, how we can continue as civil society organizations having our say in this reform process. Yes, so I was invited for today to also show this perspective today, and also to report back from you from the advisory group meeting. As some of you know, yesterday there was an advisory group meeting of the European Commission with different stakeholders on the study. So they presented the study results there, and stakeholders had the chance to ask questions and to also state their opinions. And so Catherine and I from Agenoa were there to bring in our views, and I will also report back on what we learned there from the current discussions. As we've heard from Fulia already about the study, I just want to quickly go through some points of analysis from our side. We think it's very clear that change is coming. The Commission writes that there's sufficient evidence and scientific basis to take policy action. And we also think that it's pretty clear that there will be no new one-size-fits-all regulation, but rather changes to the directives. Also yesterday in the advisory group meeting, that was confirmed, as Thomas Weber from the Commission said, it's quite clear that there's no room for improvement, no considerable room for improvement with option 0, the do nothing option, because that will not allow changes which allows achieving the goals, the new objectives also of the Green New Deal. The Green Deal. So that seems pretty clear. We as civil society organizations in the last years had some success in changing the discourse, we think. So on the one hand, the Commission admits that the legislation currently does not support the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources, which is very important that it's finally admitted and very clear also to them. They do say that the conservation of agrobiodiversity and the adaptation to climate change are important goals and important objectives now. And they're open to taking sales to amateur gardeners out of the scope and also creating a framework for farmer seed exchange. Yesterday in the advisory group meeting, we saw all of that again. So there is some awareness for this, for the importance of these topics, and the Commission seems very open to discuss these topics, even though it's for sure not clear how the outcomes will be. There's some awareness. However, we do think that some of the old problems remain. In the report and the study, agrobiodiversity is mainly seen as a reservoir for plant breeding and is not really acknowledged as the basis for transition to a more resilient, climate environment friendly food production system. Still, the solution to challenges is seen mostly in breeding of new varieties, especially through innovative techniques, and digitalization is pushed a lot in the report. And a Commission also treats seed exchange by farmers as fully already mentioned general as marketing, and does not acknowledge the rights to seeds. Also here in yesterday's meeting, the Commission said that it views UNDROP not as legally binding, and it doesn't acknowledge the right to exchange of seeds. It says it's in conflict with the EU acquis, and yeah, so there's definitely a very problematic reading of UNDROP there, and it's not acknowledged in its importance at the moment. From our side, some guiding principles which we think are important for the reform. Some first thoughts on it for the start are that any changes to the directives must really support greater diversity in farmers' rights, and of course, at the very least, have no detrimental effects. It's very clear that the gains in the organic regulation cannot be lost now, and they should, of course, pave the way forward for the new legislation. We also think it's very important that the two dossiers of new GMOs and seeds marketing legislation are treated separately, and that the debates are not mixed up. Also, we ask for a process that is clear enough for all type of stakeholders to really take part in the process. So the new directives should be consolidated proposals rather than just isolated amendments, which makes it really, really difficult to read and understand those texts. And we also think it's very important that democratic oversight remains. So delegated acts, delegated powers for the Commission must be limited to purely technical concerns and cannot be any further reaching. So from yesterday's meeting, we saw that, as already mentioned, there is a general awareness of this importance to really support greater diversity of cultivated plants. Yesterday in the meeting, several stakeholders were, also IFORM and also others, were actively pushing for the EU organic regulation to really pave the way forward. Also, the Commission's representative said, okay, they're very aware of this, and that's the way they want to go. They also reiterated that they don't plan to mix the two dossiers. In the ICF study, it was a bit mixed when they talk about molecular markers and when they talked about new GMOs, and they make clear that they're talking about the use of molecular markers for testing and for registration, and that they're not talking about new GMOs, and that they really want to keep these two topics separated. And some specific proposals from our side. We think it's very important that the sales to amateur gardeners is out of the scope, and the farmers seed exchanges is either out of the scope or there's an ad hoc framework for it that guarantees the right to exchange seeds, or the right to seeds in general under UNDROP. Yesterday at the meeting, we heard, for example, Euroseed very actively pushing for including the amateur gardeners into the legislation, and they argued that they also deserve a right to good quality of seeds, and so of course the amateur market should be included, but we of course gave our counter to that. On streamlining exemptions, we think it's important to retain the most generous provisions, which are there at the moment, to not lose anything on that. For the new diversity varieties, our proposal would be to replace conservation and amateur varieties with one general or category on new diversity varieties, or maybe that could be called differently as well. That's just the first idea. And the idea there would be that the registration is based only on description, and that there should be a greater window for that, a lighter registration form, as a greater, we view that as a greater window of opportunity for us, and of course that should be voluntary. And for the point of digitalization, we think it's very important that the use of digital techniques is optional, and there are no negative consequences if, for example, molecular markers are not used, or other new techniques and digital techniques are not used. So that should be an option for organizations to take it or to leave it without negative consequences. Yeah, the problematic reading of UNDROP we had already, and the timeline we also talked already, fully presented already. So that would it be from my side. So thanks for giving me the floor, and looking forward to discussing with all of you.
Great, thank you, Magdalena. Thank you for this update also about yesterday meeting. Really useful, and also this seed policy dialogue I think was quite well planned by as a date. And so we have a first question from Susan, and yes, if all of you know, there is the raise hand button, so you can also turn on your videos if you would like. I mean, this part probably will not be used.